Completing Connecticut, October 11th, Route 7 South to West Cornwall Road. We had got off to a late start and we had trouble finding the trail where it crossed West Cornwall Road, even though we were here in 2007. We finally found the trail and we took off the bikes and chained them inside the woods. We drove over to Route 7 in the town of Salisbury, and we had a hard time finding the trail where we had parked in 2006. The route was rerouted around Route 7 because of work that they were doing on the bridge over the Housatonic River. We had followed some signs with a white blaze on it up to Dugway Road, a new reroute. We had already done the other piece, so this was totally messing us up. We finally reached the AT where it crossed Route 7, and at the last minute decided that we did not have enough time to the bike ride back to our car, as we still needed to set up our tent at the Housatonic Meadows State Park. So we have to separate again, not one of my favorite things to do. It was an emotional separation again, as I was going south and Dave was going to drive back to West Cornwall Road and head north on the trail. As I saw him drive away, I only had the feeling to move faster on the trail so that I could see him again sooner. I started in the hemlock forest, and then the trail climbed steeply up to the top of Belter's Bump. The view was great on the top, although you could hear the noise of traffic on Route 7 for quite a distance on the ridge walk. I passed the Belter campsite where I could see someone tenting there, so I moved on quickly down the trail. Then I started another climb up to a small lookout. The trail had some PUDs over Sharon Mountain before I reached Hang Glider View. There was a great view, and it was a nice fall day with cool temperatures and a light breeze. The foliage was at its peak here, with the smell of fall leaves in the air. I passed by Sharon Mountain campsite because I did not know if Dave would be coming by soon. I was getting a little worried because this was about the halfway point on this section of the trail, and I had not seen him yet. I kept moving on the trail, and then suddenly, there he was. I ran over to him and gave him a big kiss, and he told me that he missed me. We sat here and ate our lunch on a down, white birch tree with the sun beating down on our backs, which felt good because it was cold out here. Tonight, we will be camping at the Housatonic Meadows State Park, and it is going to be a cold night in the tent. He told me that he had put the bikes back onto the car and told me that the car was parked by an insane asylum. We separated again. I hate to leave. It is so sad to say goodbye because I want to be with him, I want to hike with him, and I don't want to walk away from him. It is going to take 3 hours to get down to the car and then drive back over to pick him up. I met a lot of people hiking this section of the AT. Some had backpacks on and were heading north, so they must be section hiking, as it is late for thru hikers to be here in Connecticut. By now they should be in Maine. Dave had told me during lunch that he had talked with some hikers at Pine Swamp Brook Lean-To, and they had told him that they were doing a section hike on the AT here. I had reached a fork in the trail, and Dave had told me about it. He said that this area was poorly blazed. A breeze had picked up when I reached the top of Mount Easter. It had a small view with some nice pine trees. As I was heading down, I met a couple hiking coming up toward me, and then a woman that was hiking alone passed by me also heading north. I crossed Sharon Mountain Road, which looked passable by car, before reaching Pine Swamp Brook Lean-To. At this point, I knew that I was only about a mile from the car. Someone was inside the lean-to, and I saw their gear outside the lean-to. I could smell them cooking their dinner and did not want to disturb them. So I went back to the trail and continued my hike. I reached the downhill area of the trail after passing a large poop on a rock, maybe a wolf or coyote scat. Dave had told me that I would have to squeeze between two large boulders, like a lemon squeezer. They were really neat, and I had taken a lot of pictures of this area. 2 men who were section hiking the trail heading south had come out of the rocks as I was taking pictures. They had continued past me down the trail when they suddenly stopped and yelled up to me if this was the AT. I told them that I had been hiking in the same direction that they had been hiking and did not come up this way. There was a white blaze where I was standing, and I headed down to where they were thinking that they were on the trail. We all looked around as the trail here was not a clear path, and we could not see where it went from here. This must have been the area that Dave was talking about that was poorly blazed. We must have been wandering through the woods for over 15 minutes trying to find a white blaze on a tree. Finally, we climbed back up toward the two boulders where I had seen a white blaze on the tree. I looked around until I saw a white blaze on a tree in another direction. The trail had turned to the right after the boulders, but the blaze on the tree that I had seen had only one blaze on it, so it looked like the trail went straight. But it didn't. The trail turned to the right. There should have been a double blaze on that tree to mark the sharp turn to the right here. I had seen them in front of me when they had called me, and they were off the trail. I do not know if I was alone, if I would have noticed that the trail turned here. I was very close to the road now, and I could hear some guy yelling, "There is a car out here, full of stuff. We could have a yard sale. Get down here quickly." I hurried down the trail to the car, as our bikes were already chained to the bike rack on the car, and the car was full of our camping gear. I got into the car and locked it, then started the engine. The guy came over to my car and asked me for some direction to a road where his girlfriend was picking them up. I told him that there was a sign for West Cornwall Road, then I drove away quickly. He did have a sleeping bag with him, but I did not see a backpack. He was dressed in worn-out clothing, and I saw another guy that was laying on the ground beside the road inside his sleeping bag and talking on his cell phone about how to get here. They looked homeless, and I do not know if they were on the phone and were just joking around about our stuff or if they had planned to steal it. I was a little scared and headed back to pick up Dave. I was actually sitting here waiting for Dave as I was writing this in my notepad, when the couple that had passed me near Sharon Mountain Road had just walked past me again. It is about 4 o'clock and it is getting colder sitting in this car. I am starting to worry because this couple had passed me after we had ate our lunch, and I am not sure if I should start to hike toward him. He should have already been here by now. Well, no worries. He has just come out of the woods and is here now, and we are heading to our campground for the night. October 12th, Bullsbridge Road North to Route 341. We left our bikes in the woods off of Route 341 and drove over to Shattuck Road near the Shattuck Indian Reservation. The trail started with a steep climb up to Shattuck Mountain. It was a cold morning with the first frost of the year, and we were in our tent last night, and it was a very cold night. This morning the sun was out with no breeze. However, it was cold out. This climb was surprising hard. There were a lot of boulders in the woods, and there were still some asters and some elderberries out. The climb up took us 2 hours, and the first lookout was fantastic. I loved it. We sat her in the sun, which felt good in the cold, and ate our snake up here. After our break, we continued to climb and passed a second view before reaching Indian Rocks. This is where the Shattuck Indians came after the wars, which included the King Philip's War, the French and Indian War, and other conflicts, to get away from white settlers. The chief had reached this rock view and said, "This is my valley. Look at the river and the fertile soil. This is where I will make our home." It was a beautiful view of the Hudson River, a valley and a mountain with no development. We continued down the trail to the Shattuck tenting area. The side trail to the tenting area went up, so we did not go to it as we were tired from the climb that we had already done. It was getting cloudy out now, and the temperature was dropping. We looked at the map and discovered that we still had to climb up Mount Algo. There was a wonderful area between the two mountains that had a lovely view. We saw a red-tailed hawk soaring around above the valley in the sky in front of us. We were getting pretty wiped out at this time, and I was just slowly putting one foot in front of the other as we climbed steadily up. We reached the top of Mount Algo. It had no view, but we did see a bird hopping around in the pine, some rhododendrons, and some blueberry bushes. The map showed that there was a view here, but it was all grown in. We descended to a brook and saw another climb ahead of us. I rechecked the map and found out that we had not even reached the top of Mount Algo. The elevation of this mountain was 1,400 feet. A small one, but it had felt like it was much bigger. Shattuck Mountain was 1,200 feet, and it had also felt much bigger. We had thought that it was the biggest mountain in Connecticut, but we already knew that Bear Mountain was the highest, and we had already done that. We started to climb and was really dragging our feet now. Then we descended again. There was no views in this area, just a tree tunnel. We reached Mount Algo lean-to, so we realized that we already did reach Mount Algo. Someone had left an old day pack, socks, a map, a flashlight, and a rope inside the lean-to here. The pack smelled like someone had peed on it. The lean-to was a nice log-style lean-to, and we ate our lunch inside it. The foliage was beautiful here, and it looked like we were in the peak of the fall season. We had a lot of people pass us on the trail in both directions. Many of them appeared to be section hiking. We left the lean-to, and the rest of the trail went down the hill, and we reached our bike fairly quickly. We rode our bikes back to the car through the Indian reservation, and we reached a teepee with a sign that said open, so we looked around. There was a lot of spiritual items inside, and there was 2 couches outside the teepee. The teepee was just made with sticks with no cover, and there was a fire going inside a stone fire pit inside the teepee. We saw a house that had a spiritual rock formation, another house that had chickens in the yard. You could really feel the spiritual power of the woods and of the native people here. Then we saw some signage about the reservation on several lawns to reclaim the area of the AT because they wanted to build a casino as part of its efforts to gain federal recognition. It is a shame that the native people are upset and are trying to sue the AT. It was a wonderful day, and the ride back on the bike was nice, as the dirt road had ran right beside the river. It was very picturesque. I loved this day. October 13th, Skiff Mountain Road north to Route 4. We are separating again. I know that the destination is the journey, but we are so close to finishing the AT in Connecticut, and I am getting very excited about finishing this state. It was raining this morning when we woke up, and a cold front is moving into this area today. The forecast for today is overcast skies and rain in the morning, and then becoming partly sunny in the afternoon, with another rain shower later in the afternoon. Dave had dropped me off on Swift Mountain Road, and I was heading north, while Dave drove over to Route 4 and headed south toward me. I started with a climb, not a terrible climb up, and emerged onto Caleb's Peak with a small sign to indicate the top. It was still cloudy out, so there was no view here, and it was raining lightly again. It had stopped raining when I started the climb, so I had taken off my rain jacket because I was getting hot. Now I had to put it back on again. I smelled a strange odor after I descended from the peak, and I wondered if it was a bear. Dave had smelled the same odor on Sunday, and it was a musky, pungent odor. A bear's scent in the woods is often described as a musky odor. However, a musky, pungent odor in the woods is most likely caused by the scent of a muskrat, deer, or skunk, marking their territory through their scent glands. I climbed up again to St. John's Ledges. It was still cloudy and was raining, so once again I had no views. The descent from St. John's Ledges was bad. There were many steep boulders and rocks going down. It looked like a rock slide. Some areas had a cave between several boulders. I felt bad that Dave would have to climb this. It would be a hand-over-hand climb. I heard a crow nearby as I descended for what felt like a mile. I saw sheer smooth cliffs above me when I reached the bottom. I do not think that I had seen these kinds of sheer cliff rocks since White Rocks in Vermont. The trail here leveled out, and I winded around through a forest. The sun was out and casting shadows in the woods. I reached a drivable dirt road and was feeling really bummed that I was walking this road, because I hate road walks. I just don't think that cars driving past you on the road is very relaxing. While walking alone, I am always afraid of meeting other people in the woods. You never know if they are friendly or not. I miss Dave walking with me. I walked the road for about a mile when I reached an area where it was no longer passable by car, and then it narrowed back into a dirt path through the woods. The trail followed alongside the Housatonic River here, and the fall colors were beautiful with the sun shining on them. I took a massive amount of pictures here with my digital camera. I remember when you only had film cameras and could only take so many pictures. Now with the digital cameras, you can go crazy and just keep taking pictures. It was great. The trail in this area was not very well blazed along the river. and there were other paths off this trail, so you were never sure where the trail turned off from this path, or if the path just turned away from the river. It is the most poorly blazed section that I had ever seen on the Appalachian Trail. Sometimes I hear sounds of traffic or the sounds of people nearby, as Route 7 is just on the other side of the river, but you could not see the road. However, the scenery here is great. I finally reached the sign for Stewart Brook Campsite, which is where we are supposed to meet. I left our sterno can near the start of the trail to the lean-to, with a stick arrow pointing into the lean-to, for Dave to find his way in, as I was concerned that he would not see the sign as it is difficult to see from the trail as it is high up on the tree. I feared that he would just keep walking past the trail. Dave had arrived about 5 minutes after I reached the lean-to. I was so happy to see him, and I gave him a big kiss because I missed him so much. I always miss him terribly when we have to split up on the trail, but it is a way to cover more trail in the short period of time that we are here, and we do not have to walk back on the trail from the way that we came in. Dave said that he was worried when he had passed a lot of campsites during his hike. He told me that he did not see any lean-to at these sites, and he did not know if one of the campsites did have a lean-to, and that he did not go in far enough to see it. He said that he finally had seen the lean-to from the trail. I asked him if he had seen the sterno can. He said that he did not see the can, but he did see the sign on the tree for this campsite, and he said that he had seen my hiking poles as he approached the lean-to. We had our lunch inside the lean-to and headed back out onto the trail. He told me to be careful as the AT turns away from the river and it is difficult to see the blaze where the trail turns. We separated again, and I had passed through 2 fields, hay fields I believe, with a nice view of a mountain. Then I entered into an overgrown area. This area had a lot invasive plants, barberry, multiflora rose, and some bamboo stalks. I believe that this will someday be engulfed by these invasive plants. I only saw a couple of women on the trail today, one walking a dog and the other was a jogger, and I saw a flock of geese in the river. The sun had gone back into the clouds and a cold breeze was picking up. The sun was in and out of the clouds for the rest of the afternoon, but at least it was not raining. I crossed a paved road and started my climb up to Silver Hill. I was getting tired at this point, so the climb seemed harder than it was. I reached Silver Camp and it was very nice. It had a covered kitchen pavilion, a water pump, and a new wooden 2-seated porch swing. I passed a southbound hiker eating a cheese sandwich on the side of the trail. I believe that through or section hikers eat better than us on the trail. All we have is a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I would kill for a nice cheese sandwich right about now. I had a steep descent to Route 4, but no rocks or boulders. Dave had pretty much all of the climbs today. I picked up Dave, who did not have a smile on his face after climbing St. John Ledges. I had seen some chipmunks, squirrels, and I saw either a black mole of mouse running across the field. I only heard some crows today. October 14th, Hoyt Road North to Bulls Bridge Road. Again, we are separating on our 4-day marathon to finish Connecticut. Dave had dropped me off on Hoyt Road in New York, and he is going to be heading south from Bulls Bridge Road in Connecticut. Another woman also got dropped off here and had started about 5 minutes after I started the trail heading in the same direction that I was going. I reached the Connecticut and New York line, a small sign which was nailed to a tree saying, Appalachian Trail, Connecticut, Maine to Georgia. I was moving pretty fast because the other woman was almost on my tail. I reached Route 55 and started a climb up through a hardwood forest. I was getting really warm and I needed to take off my long johns. This morning was 35 degrees and the grass was covered in frost. Now the sun was out and the temperature had gone up. I went behind some big rocks off the side of the trail and I took of my long johns and pooped here. Meanwhile, the other woman had passed by on the trail and did not see me. I climbed up to the top of 10 Mile Hill. There was not much of a view here, so I headed back to the trail. I met Dave shortly after, and we were happy to see each other, and he had called me his pumpkin because I was dressed in orange. He said that he had become worried because he had passed the other woman as he was hiking toward me. He said that he had asked her if she had seen me, and she said that she did not see me. He had become worried that I had taken a wrong trail off the AT. I explained to him what had happened. He had forgotten the video camera in the tent this morning and had told me that there was not anything interesting to video on this section. I told him that I had my Canon PowerShot and was able to take some video with it. We separated, and I reached a nice pine forest before descending. When I started, I only had hardwoods, so this area was definitely more interesting. I reached the Housatonic River, and shortly after, I reached 10 Mile Shelter. Again, it was located in a very interesting area. So far, this is my favorite part of the trail this vacation. The log-style lean-to was on an open field with views of the mountains. The warm sun felt great as it shined inside the lean-to. Dave had told me that he had used the privy here. It was a composting privy, and a bucket of leaves was inside it, and you are instructed to drop a handful of leaves inside to help compost your waste. It was nice and had no odor. Dave told me that he had refilled the leaf bucket before he left the site. This whole section along the river was interesting and beautiful with the autumn leaves. I crossed an interesting bridge that was famous and was pictured in the AT magazines and in hiking videos that we had watched. The river after the bridge had rapids moving fast over the smooth boulders in the river. Yesterday, we walked along the quiet river that was very smooth, so this river varies a lot. I walked through the fall leaves, kicking them up as I moved through them. I loved this area, and I had taken a lot of very interesting videos. Skiff Mountain Road south to Route 341. Same day, and we are separating again to finish Connecticut. Dave had dropped me off on Skiff Mountain Road, and I will be heading south. This is where we were yesterday. This section had a very mellow climb through the hardwoods. I had to climb over a new blowdown over the trail. I could not imagine the noise when this big tree fell down over the trail. I saw some white birch cluster in this area, and I reached a small view before I had reached the top of Fuller Mountain at the same time that Dave had reached it. He told me that he had some nice views with a white church in the valley on his way up. He also told me that his side had a steep climb with some larger boulders, but not as hard as St. John's ledges. As soon as we separated, I started my descent, and I reached a hemlock forest and the rocky ledges. It is amazing how one side of the mountain is so much different than the other side as to the difficulty of the climb, or in my case, the descent. So far, most of this trip, Dave had the steeper climbs, not by design, mind you, but on the better note, his side also started off in the prettier area. I descended more steeper through the hemlock forest and then out onto an open field that was full of wildflowers that were still out. I saw a couple of purple flowers that I did not know, and I saw some asters and some goldenrods that were still out. I also saw a garter snake that was sunning itself on the trail. I crossed a 2-log foot bridge that's stone that was wrapped in wire mesh at each end of the logs. I crossed a fence stile when I reached Route 341 where Dave was waiting for me. October 15th, Great Falls parking lot north to Limestone Spring Lean-To Junction. This is our last day and we are going home today. It is also the last 3 miles on the AT in Connecticut. We were up at the crack of dawn, 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was cold out, 35 degrees, and it felt like it was going to start to snow. We headed out of the campground at about 4:30 because we wanted to get to the Great Falls parking lot before sunrise and get onto the trail so that we could see the beautiful sunrise. We had trouble finding the Great Falls Appalachian Trail parking area. Even though we had been here in 2006, only 3 years ago, I just could not remember exactly where the trailhead parking lot was. We finally found the parking lot and had got onto the trail just at the crack of dawn, expecting to see a beautiful sunrise. However, it never happened. It was cloudy and cold out, and the ground was covered in frost. It felt like it was going to snow any minute now, and I had thought that it was too early in the year for snow. However, we later found out after we got home that this area had 2 inches of snow after we left. We were really humming it out on this trail, mostly due to the fact that we were really cold and that we still had to go back to the campground to pack up the tent and our supplies as we are heading home today. The trail climbed gradually up to Mount Prospect in a mostly hardwood forest. We reached the top, and there was not much of a view here. One of the problems in Connecticut on the trail is that you could always hear traffic and construction equipment. The trail is sometimes on open ridges where we always see graveling and city or towns. You do not see much forested areas as Connecticut is too populated. We reached the side trail to Limestone Spring Lean-To. This is where we're going to finish Connecticut. Doing the Appalachian Trail like this, we do not always finish a section of the AT at the state lines. It is not like through hiking or even section hiking, where you start a state at a state line and finish it at the next state line. We have to plan our trips by time and travel distance. It is always difficult and sad that we have to leave the AT and go home and back to work. We always want to keep going, but we can't. We did our ritual with the toilet paper, crossing into the next state, and left the trail.